Smallpox, one of the deadliest diseases known to humankind. It has killed over 500 million people, more than any other plague or virus. This disease is also one of the oldest of its kind. It originated in 13th century BC in Egypt, where its people and their king, Ramses V, caught it, and then it would continue to spread around the world in a disastrous fashion. This dangerously and continuously appearing disease was defeated by one little thing, one of the first of its kind, created by Edward Jenner, known as the smallpox vaccine. You'd think a disease of any sort would absolutely be curable, but that wasn't the case for smallpox. In fact, thousands of years after the disease's introduction, no cures were figured out. The issue here, however, was smallpox is particularly contagious and dangerous, especially compared to other diseases of the modern era, who have extremely minor symptoms, like the flu, fever, cold, and cough. However, smallpox consisted of rather major symptoms that could result in death. Firstly, the smallpox would affect their victims through an incubation period of 7 to 9 days. No symptoms around this time would make their appearance. However, later on, the symptoms you see on this board would come. Rashes would first go on the tongue, then they would spread throughout the whole body, and then they would fill with pus. And the picture you see right over here is what will be the result. Then later on, if the person didn't die, the scabs, which were what the pus-filled rashes were, would fall off to leave deep pitted scars that would forever be in the person's body. Because of this, there was no way to actually cure smallpox using natural remedies at that time, and all their attempts would continue to remain futile. The people of that era could only manage to successfully make milder symptoms out of smallpox on people who were unaffected, in the hopes they stay alive with no severe side effects. This method was figured out around the 10th century AD, 2,300 years after smallpox's introduction, when a Buddhist monk in the province of Sichuan, China, discovered this process and called it variolation, which involved taking a smallpox scab and blowing it into the nose of a healthy patient. Although this method did have a 3% chance of death, it was much better than the original odds, which was 30%, and proved detrimental to find the cure to smallpox, the smallpox vaccine. Since he was young, Edward Jenner had shown a very deep interest in medicine, though he was unfortunately the son of a common vicar, which meant his dreams and chances to go to medical school crumbled. However, he did work as an apprentice for a surgeon in London at the age of 14, and later on became a countryside physician. But despite his small success, his income was quite low, and he could barely make ends meet. In 1786, however, Edward Jenner's medical focus turned towards smallpox, which he before thought was a dangerous disease that no one could understand. This happened due to Jenner living in a countryside full of cows, where he noticed that milkmaids had soft, fair, and delicate skin, strange for the time for a bunch of commoners. Edward Jenner wondered why this was, and eventually Sarah Mullin of the parish of Eastington in this county, when about 13 or 14 years of age, lived as a servant with Farmer Clark, who kept a dairy consisting of about 18 cows at Stonehouse, a neighbouring village. The nipples and udders of 3 of the cows were extensively affected with large white blisters. These cows the girl milked daily, and at the same time she assisted with 2 others in milking the rest of the herd. It soon appeared that the disease was communicated to the girl. The rest of the cows escaped the infection, although they were milked several days after the 3 above specified had these eruptions on the nipples and udders, and even after the girl's hand became sore. The 2 others who were engaged in milking, although they milked the cows indiscriminately, received no injury. On the fingers of each of the girl's hands there appeared several large white blisters. She supposes about 3 or 4 on each finger. The hands and arms inflamed and swelled, but no constitutional indisposition followed. The fours were anointed with some domestic ointment, and got well without ulcerating. as this malady was called the cowpox and recorded as such in the mind of the patient. She became regardless of the smallpox, but upon being exposed to it to some years afterwards, she was infected and had full birth. Now, had anyone concerned with the habits of the disease ever heard this history, they would have no hesitation in pronouncing it a case of spurious cowpox, considering its deviation and the numerous blisters which appeared on the girl's hands, their termination without ulceration. It's not proving more generally contagious at the farm, either among the cattle and those employed in milking, and considering also that the patient felt no general indisposition, although there was so great a number of vesicles. Observations, he figured out that cows contained a variety of the variola virus, known as variola minor, aka cowpox. Smallpox is known as variola major. After further studying the relations between cowpox and smallpox, cowpox was actually found to be a cure for smallpox. Edward Jenner tested out his theories by taking his gardener's son, James Phipps, as his test subject. The first thing he attempted was inserting some cowpox pus into his body through slashes on his arm. Then, after Phipps' short recovery through cowpox, more slashes were made, and smallpox pus was inserted this time. Phipps did not develop any symptoms of smallpox. Jenner eventually named this process vaccination, his cure to the worldwide issue, smallpox. Incredibly shook by his discovery, Jenner immediately traveled to grand establishments, such as the Royal College of London and the Daily Post. He published all of his findings there, and also went and tested more people to clarify what his statement that he found the cure to smallpox. The results proved to be the same as with James Phipps, and it was evident that Edward had truly made his breakthrough in the medical industry. He was getting a huge amount of recognition, but of course with that recognition, that too came conflict, and a dangerous amount of it. Edward Jenner's actions certainly impacted the medical community, but the question was if it was a good thing or rather an issue. After all, although the discovery was groundbreaking, there was little evidence as to whether it was morally or ethically right. In fact, most of his medical peers hotly debated his practices at his medical debut. His testing subjects in particular were controversial to say the least. James Phipps was a 6-year-old child who was forced without consent by Edward Jenner and even his own father to be vaccinated. Edward Jenner himself tried his best to continue testing out his vaccine to prove to his peers that it was indeed morally correct. But to his avail, Jenner couldn't clear his name before he met his tragic end on January 26th of 1823. It took a while for medical professionals to get comfortable with Jenner's medical practice. However, slowly they realized that the smallpox vaccine was actually one of the safest methods possible and could possibly change public health. Smallpox was eradicated completely in 1979, after one last patient in the country of Somalia was cured, making it the first and only disease recorded in history to be classified as completely eradicated. But the story of smallpox was not told properly. Yes, there was a single museum in England which commemorates Edward Jenner's discovery, but other than that, his accomplishment has not gotten any of the recognition it deserves. Think of other epidemics like cholera and the bubonic plague, which are still popularized today. Although the smallpox vaccine changed the entire public health system, no one really recognizes it, and no one really understands it. So we should continue to tell the story of Edward Jenner's discovery and the smallpox vaccine, one of the first, as an example for many changes in public health and medical innovation to come.